Hi, thanks for joining us for another podcast. I'm Peter Teuscher. I'm here with Toby Demker, and we are talking about all things around personal development, leadership, organizational change, all that kind of stuff, and basically just having a conversation where we pick a topic and see where the discussion goes. So, how are you doing today, Toby?
Yeah, I'm doing good, thank you. It's I had an early morning as well, up playing paddle, if you know what that is.
No.
It's kind of a caged double tennis. It's like a mix of t double tennis and squash almost.
Ah,
It's become really popular in Sweden. I think it's originated from Spain. Anyway,
is it,
it's really fun, and I was up doing that for two
oh,
hours this morning, so ready to go.
very active. I was up at sunrise with the dog this morning, our last walk before she goes to her permanent home, my foster dog.
Uh,
So, yeah, both an early start. Let's hope we're on the ball this morning. I know
yeah.
I haven't been so far. But anyway, this is the first one of these where I'm completely unprepared because, as I mentioned to you, I didn't see your email on the topic until just this morning. So we're just going to roll with it. And
Yeah,
as we
that's
usually
fine.
do, most of them are spontaneous anyway. So what do you got for us today?
Well, Simon, I thought we'll talk about something that definitely has to do with personal development, as you mentioned, with organizational development, with leadership development, and something that I think we all kind of struggle with in our lives, and yeah, to some extent. So just dealing with change, and of course, it's a huge topic, right? And we can talk about it from the personal level. What kind of personal changes do you aspire to, and what's difficult with that? To organizational change, or maybe just changes in your team, but yeah, impact it has on the organization, the people that you work with together. So a lot of different aspects on the topic, but maybe it feels natural to start from the personal perspective. What we like to change with ourselves, and a little bit why it's so difficult, right? I think
Hmm.
it's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a coach, I know that's the main reason people come for coaching is they want to change something about themselves, about their lives. Either they need clarity on what they actually want, or they need help in the process of getting there, overcoming roadblocks. And I think with change, I mean that's the biggest thing. Our own internal, well, our own perception of it, and our own internal roadblocks to in order to make sure change for the sake of change is not always positive, but
Mm,
generally change brings with it so many opportunities because when you make a significant life change, it's an opportunity to develop new habits. That's one of the easiest times to develop new habits,
mm,
and it gets you out of your comfort zone. I think we all kind of deal with you know it's safer to kind of change is tied to risk, right? So for on a I think um on the level of like biology organisms, they talk about homeostasis, and I think on a
mm.
psychological level, I've often wondered if homeostasis also applies to that because we're looking for this equilibrium, this balance, and to avoid change is what helps you keep that stability, and
Yeah.
even when the change is necessary or good or positive, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's those roadblocks are interesting in terms of how unconscious we can be about them. I mean, we can get into depth about this a little bit later, but I want to connect to what you were saying of where does this change come from? Is it a positive or a negative change? How do we perceive it? And is it internally driven? So it's something that I want to change or develop within myself. Say that you want to, I don't know, quit smoking or lose weight or start new habits or whatever. Or is it forced upon you? So if you're fired from your job, or you lose your job or something like that, and you're forced to change I mean, your work or whatever you're doing, right? And that put it in different contexts, but still, I mean, whatever the context, it can still be very very difficult to deal with. It might actually be easier to deal with if it's forced upon you, because then you don't really have a choice. Then you just have to roll with the change, right? But I perceive it as more frustrating sometimes when there's something that you want to change, but you find this inner obstruction or things that are blocking the change.
Yeah.
Um,
I think when change is forced upon you, that's when it causes the most stress often. And what causes the stress, though, is the resistance to the change. I mean, we all know, I think it's been repeated so many times, change is the one constant in life, right? Change is ongoing and ever present in our lives, in our culture, in our society. Things will always be changing. And when we kind of push back against it and resist it, that is what causes us a lot of the stress. And so I think having change forced upon you, the sooner you accept it and figure out what you're in control of and how you can deal with it, the better off you are. And I think it depends on the kind of change that there is. I know when it's weird that I've brought this up a few times on podcasts, but when my marriage ended, I was like, leading up to it, I was really pushing against, resisting it, and then after it happened and I accepted it, I was at peace with it, and it was far better for me. It was far more stressful when I was trying to fight against, and I think it's normal to try and save a marriage, but that certainly caused me a lot of stress. And sometimes it's changing a job, right? Or if you lose a job and that forces major changes in your life, you have an identity that's tied to that. I had an identity that was me as part of a married couple, that was a change of identity. If you lose a job, a lot of things are tied to that. I know in Germany, for example, middle and upper management jobs will have a car tied to them, and a certain lifestyle. Yeah. So all of a sudden your identity has become maybe driving a nice Audi and having an expense account and so on, and then all of a sudden those things are gone, and then who are you, right? There becomes this identity crisis. So forced change can put us through all kinds of paces like that. And sometimes it can be, a death in the family or something, or someone close to us that can force change on us. And those things are out of our control, and it can be really hard. Those are the kind of changes that can be really hard to deal with because we're unprepared for them. We're not, they're not the things that we plan and we anticipate. We can see them coming. We can prepare ourselves for them. But the things that kind of happen out of the blue, they catch us off guard. But sometimes, obviously not in the case of tragedies, but those big changes that we weren't expecting, that we at first think it's a disaster, sometimes turn out to be the biggest blessings in life, right?
Sure. Yeah, I agree. I mean, when we are kind of forced to, or we're put in the situation you talked about the comfort zone, to step out from that comfort zone and look a little bit deeper on yourself and your assumptions and who you are as a person. And this is what Robert Keegan, he speaks a lot about, this immunity to change, right? That we have this immunity to change where is a system to protect us, and to be able to change, we need to realize what this immunity consists of. And he talks about the big assumptions. What are our big assumptions are about ourselves that are making us do things that are contra or opposite of what we actually want to change, and on a very often an unconscious level. And that connects into, if you look at Kahneman's work on our different systems of how we think with our rational brain and our more intuitive brain, that this resistance or the immunity is actually planted in our intuitive system, which makes us that we can't see what the obstacles are, and they are there to protect us from this change, right? And that's what makes it so difficult, that we have to identify what are these unconscious blocks or obstacles that are hindering us from changing. And that makes it really fascinating, I think, when you have to go to that level of depth, that rather than rationally just understanding the change and what needs to happen, it seems like that it's not enough, right?
No, and you're right. I think that is apart from all the other challenges that change present us, that you've got to overcome those inner instincts. You know, we are wired to kind of conserve energy and to to avoid risks, and that's what gives us our security and our safety. And any kind of change is creates that risk for us. And so yeah, apart from our own perception of what could happen, or the things that we're hanging on to, that we don't want to let go of, that are keeping us stuck in the past. Um, those are one half of the equation, but what you're alluding to is, the biological and the mental kind of framework that we're dealing with, that we also have to overcome. That's trying to keep us, stable. And I guess that's what I was referring to as homeostasis, or the mental, the psychological version of homeostasis. Although I doubt that's I don't think that's an actual psychological term, but but I agree. I think you've got to overcome those inner urges. The as you called them, the intuitive kind of presets that I guess we have, and then you've got to deal with all your other psychological baggage. The stuff you're hanging on to, the stuff that's it just it's funny, because I wrote a blog a few months ago about how we don't know sometimes how bad things were until we've kind of stepped away. And actually, here's a great example. There's a colleague from a previous company that I worked at, who changed jobs, and she said, after she'd resisted changing and had other offers and whatever, and then she made a change because she's got family and everything, and she's equal contributor financially, and then she made this change after many, many years at this company, and then she said, after I made the change, I didn't know why I waited so long, right? So these are these things that we're hanging on to, this perceived security, and there are no guarantees in life. Security is an illusion, and but we hang on to these things, and they keep us stuck when really this change would be the best thing for us a lot of the times, right? So just being aware of those things that are holding us there are really important.
Yeah, except but when we're I'm referring to it as sort of unlocking that immunity to change.
Yeah.
And I think, that's a real. It's not well. It is a risk, I guess, but that's maybe where you might need support, and where it can be it can be extremely uncomfortable when you unlock that baggage to seeing yourself for what you really are, or what you actually want to be, and unlocking all these changes that you've identified yourself with. That can be quite the journey, right? So I'm not saying that this is an easy thing to do. And funny, when you were talking about that, your former colleague, I thought of an example of a guy that we worked with, and my colleague was coaching this person, and we hadn't seen him for a while, but then the next time we met at a workshop, and we saw him, and hey, how's it going? And he was like, it's great, I'm divorced, it's fantastic. So obviously that was something that he needed, right? And the coaching in that case really helped him to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes one of these painful exits of a relationship or whatever, sometimes it's the best thing for both parties, I guess.
Absolutely.
That's not a decision to be taken lightly, right? That's not what I'm saying.
No.
But sometimes it can be the right thing.
Exactly. I think, regardless of the situation that you're in, so for some people are, they, as a way of avoiding issues, or some people change relationships frequently, because they don't want to have to deal with sort of issues or situations, And same with work situations. They don't want to have to confront the areas where they need to develop and evolve. And the first sign of conflict or challenge, they jump ship and they try and find something else. So there's that side of it. I mean, just change for the sake of change, or as an avoidance strategy. That's important to be aware of when we're doing that. That's not helpful, and that's running away from things rather than moving towards what you want. Right. That's one thing I often when with people I'm coaching. It's like understanding your motivation behind a certain change, and if it's just a kind of run away from or move away from what you're afraid of or what you're trying to avoid is a big difference from moving towards what you really want. So I think it's understanding your motivation for change is also really important, and making sure that it's not a fear response. It's not something you're running away from.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I just thought about that difference of, I mean, talk about playing not to lose or playing to will, or sorry, playing to
To
win.
win, yeah.
And maybe it's a silly metaphor, but it's really a difference in the energy of what's driving you there, right? And I think a lot of us at times we're too much in that playing not to lose kind of situation, and to
Absolutely.
turn that into that, okay, taking a few risks and playing to will. It's from a motivational point of view, it is very different. Yeah.
Yeah, the more that you've built up in life, the more success that you've had, the more kind of your identity is invested in what you've achieved and your success, the more you're worried about losing it, the more you're worried about giving it up. And there is risk in every change, but it's always, in business, people always look at risks and opportunities, and you can do the same thing in life. What's the size of the opportunity? And people sometimes they focus too heavily on the risk. We're great at worrying and catastrophizing and kind of creating this worst case scenario in our mind. But most of us have a harder time, looking at the opportunity and imagining how good it could be. Right? We tend to focus far more on. It seems like the prudent thing to do. It seems like being, erring on the side of caution, especially, and I totally understand if people have kids, if people have a family, they have a mortgage, they want to make sure that their kids, are taken care of, and they're never going to be in a position that they can't be a provider. So I understand all of that. But the thing is, it's also important to look at, what are you giving up in order to keep the status quo, and what are you sacrificing from yourself? And that's where we go back to the discussion we had on values. Values aren't just your ethics or your morals; they're actual needs that you have, and when you're sacrificing those. Because those are what are pushing you towards change a lot of times, to find that resonance with the things that you want to be doing. And we make a lot of sacrifices to the things we value in order to get success or gain stability for our families and so on. So
Yeah.
I think that need for stability, security is a big one. And look, we're very
Sure.
fortunate that we live, for the most part, you and I certainly, and people in the Western world tend to live in very stable societies. And for the, unless you're at the poverty level or below, we all have a safety net, or there's only so far you can fall. And usually the things we imagine going wrong are far worse than would actually, are things that
Yeah.
have a very low likelihood of actually happening for the most part. I mean, there are people who have their rose-colored glasses on and they have their biases and they don't want to see the pitfalls ahead. But for the most part, I think people err far more on the side of caution. So when you're making,
Sure.
when there's a change that you really want, you'll be biased towards, the best possible outcome. But when you're resisting change, then you're more likely to focus on all the things that are going to go wrong, right? So it's just trying to keep that in balance and making sure that you're having a nuanced view of things, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot about that awareness as well. I think I've talked many times about creating awareness about the false assumptions, or what actually Keegan is talking about, it with the big assumptions. Now,
Mm.
I love that question to think about. So what's at risk, if that happens, and asking that many times. So what's at risk if I take this step, or if I pursue this kind of change, and then looking at that question many many times, and if you dig really deep, often you can see, either find your assumptions, or maybe it's a value that that is kind of holding you back in that sense. Uh, but I agree. I mean, there's very very often, I think that it's a false assumption that is keeping us back, and
Yeah.
we would benefit more of taking that risk of taking the risk of betting on making us happy.
Absolutely.
How I mean, but of course, I mean, if you don't want to gamble with your family situation, or whatever it is, that's, of course, it's not a easy decision to make. And to that point, I mean, we can also see that change is very much related to qualitative or cognitive kind of aware decision making as well. Right? So when it comes to change, I mean, thinking about the decisions that needs to be taken, maybe that's another topic for us, but I mean, it's very closely related.
Absolutely. I think change in terms of the things that you really want, when you have clarity, I think that's a time that you need to be confident about making change, because I've got a couple of examples. I'll give you two of them. There's a friend of mine from Vancouver when I lived there, from years ago, and she told me the story of how her father at 50 years old decided to give up his career and his at that time, and become a photographer, and he actually became successful at it, and was far happier, was really successful at it, but also far happier, was then a better father. Well, not better, I don't know if he was worse before, she didn't put it that way, but certainly was with a family with kids, was willing to take that risk, and was so passionate about it and made it work. I mean, if you know yourself and you've got the drive to follow through, and you'll do whatever it takes to be successful, then I mean, how much risk is there?
Yeah.
So that's one example. I mean, a lot of people would say, well, at 50, can you really, with a family and kids, really? Do you want to do it?
Yeah.
I mean, look, these days, I have a friend who's here in Hamburg, who's a photographer, who said, it's just so hard now because everybody's taking photos with their phone and everything, and you
Yeah.
can there's lots of great shots out there, even from amateurs.
Mm.
So fine, that was that time. But I'll get the second story, and I don't know this firsthand. Someone relayed the story to me about a guy who was. So I didn't know these people personally, but there was a guy who had this plan to go travel the world, and he had this savings plan, and he would then go part time and then do all this travel. But then there came a time when I think there were some unexpected tax bills or whatever, and he just realized he wasn't going to achieve his goal at the time that for that early retirement to travel. So he said, "Screw it, I'm going to start traveling now." And so what happened is he became a lot happier. He became a lot better at his job. He got promoted, earned more money, and exceeded his financial targets that he had laid out for himself just by going for it and making that change in his life. I think when the change feels right, and when we have that impulse to change, and we recognize it's not a fear response, it's not something we're running away from. If we really have this strong desire, commitment to make the change, then don't let fear stand in your way. That's when those bits of resistance you were talking about that's when it's time to overcome them and really make the commitment. So there's just lots of examples out there. The people who are really happy and successful in life are the people who were willing to take a risk and pursue the things that they loved, that they were very clear about, that they're very convinced that they wanted to do with their lives.
Yeah.
And so I think that's an important message to give to people when they're considering a change, right? When I look at this house that I live in, I live in a great neighborhood in Hamburg, and I bought this house at near the end of the financial crisis. At the
Yeah.
time, we just had the company that I was working for just had a new board come in, new CEO and new executives, and there was a pretty high risk that I could have lost my job, but it just felt right to buy the house and make the change. And look, I kept the house through the divorce, and I'm super happy because the real estate prices have gone through the roof. Plus, I love the neighborhood I live in. So from a financial perspective, from a well-being perspective, from all the memories I've built over the years in this house, I'm really glad I took that risk. And I made that change from renting, like moving in, because we were living in Munich at the time, moved to Hamburg. Hamburg was the city that was always the first choice, in Germany at least. And so, making that change was absolutely the right thing to do, even though it felt scary at the time. I think that's another important point. Change can feel scary. It's okay.
Yeah.
I think it's important to look at your fear, to just sit with it and be with it, and just don't let it be. A lot of times fear sits sort of in the periphery or in the back of our minds, and it nags at us and it keeps us and it holds us back. But when we look at it head on, it kind of shrinks it down. So especially when it refers to change, look at what you're actually afraid of. What are you really fearing in making this change? And a lot of times it's minor things. It's like, yeah, but I feel really comfortable. I really like this, or I'm not sure what that nothing is ever going to be 100% certain in your future, right? There's no guarantee in life. So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, no, but that's good examples. It's interesting, and actually, it's really inspiring to hear these kind of stories, right? When you realize that, I mean, what I mentioned, that what's at risk, that there isn't that much of a risk if you really dig into it. And then I love that. I mean, we talk a lot about that in something called Theory U. This Otto Scharmer, he's come up with this fantastic theory around. It's change, but it's not driven by change itself. It's change driven from the emerging future, and he talks a lot about this. It's actually a curve or a U, but letting go to let come. So what do we need to let go of to let come and step into the emerging future? Of course, there's a lot of steps on the way in terms of connecting with yourself and with others, and opportunities that are arising. So it's a whole theory about it, but the whole concept is about that, letting go to let come, and looking into the needs of the future. And for me, I think what's really inspiring about this is what is actually. Okay, sorry. It's inspiring and also saddening at the same time, because what is driving the development of our planet, if we put it on a very macro level, there's so much resistance to changes that we actually need to take, in this fear of letting go. Like, we can't let go of the systems, if there's financial systems or whatever process that are there, that we feel that we need these to drive our societies and our economies ongoing, right? We can't let go of that. So that's really blocking us and hindering us from achieving these changes that we need to do to create that emerging future that we actually need to have for a sustainable society or a plan. I mean, it's now we're putting it very.
You're opening a whole can of worms now. I tell you, you're gonna get me. You're gonna get me going. I think you're trying to get me to talk politics or something. No, but I agree with you. There are a number of things that keep us stuck in the things we know that we need to change, and yet the systems the stability in the systems that make us either make people feel, organizations give them a sense of power. People don't want to give up, the comfort they have or the situation they have. even though we know that the change is necessary and we're waiting for someone else to kind of make the first move or whatever. So I think that that is a, established. There's established power systems there. The system sometimes works to on this self-preservation, right? So all these established authorities that we have in our societies, they are self-preserving, right? In many ways, and so the change that would benefit us, there's resistance to it because there's this question around, where is my future in that new reality, right? Where's that place for me?
For me, right?
Well, what's in it for me?
Really
yeah, and what have I got to lose? What could I lose? I think the things we expect politicians to change. I don't know that they have the incentive always to do those because they could undermine their own future in that role, or their own the power balance or whatever. So I think they're definitely
Well, sure. I mean,
that's at
but
play.
from an empathetic point of view, also we need to understand that it's really difficult to have the courage to drive a change like
Oh
that. I
yeah.
mean, we're talking about personal changes where can I risk, my mortgage or my family situation or whatever it is. If you're in charge of an institution or a country, I mean, do you want to gamble with? There's a lot more to lose there. So I mean, I think we also need to have some empathy for the leaders that we kind of blame a lot of leaders sometimes for not driving changes enough. But man, it's not an easy job to do, right?
Oh,
There's a lot of resistance there.
well, we look to other people to make the change first, right? You take the
Yeah.
first move, right? And we look to our leaders to do it for us. But when I talk to people, there will be people who are concerned about the environment, but then they'll do something like they'll eat a ton of meat, right? And not just like organic meat, but the factory farms and stuff. I mean, that's a huge contributor um, to greenhouse gases, the CO2 and so on, and so it's a big component of it. And so look, I'm not telling anybody what to do to be a vegetarian or whatever. Everybody makes those choices individually, but you can't. It's very there's a lot of hypocrisy out there, right? There
Yeah,
people
of course.
pointing the
Yeah.
finger, and then because the only change that you have control of is your own, right? The choices that you make, that's the only control, that's the only thing you really have control of changing. And so when people are interested in changing the world, you start with yourself. And is it Gandhi who said, be the change you want to see in the world?
Yeah.
It's so if you want to encourage change, there's like a mentor of mine, Dr. Johnny Gray in Canada. She said, you can't force people to change. All you can do is be the best example possible, right? So when it comes to changing others, or I think you need to let that go. But the focusing on dealing with the change in yourself, and so internally and externally, I think that's the biggest agent of change is and just things like people say, well, I'm only one person. How can I make a difference? And I go, well, there's a lot to be said for the power of one. The simple things like being a consumer. We're part of the most powerful group in the world, consumers, right? We're a market-driven societies. Most of us live in market-driven societies, and so basically, every time you buy something, you're basically voting. It gets scanned across. You're voting for that thing, right? So.
Sure.
People do a ton of market research. So every individual person who makes a more conscious choice, they're contributing to the change, hopefully, that they want to see in the world, or they're contributing to keeping things the same as they are, right? So, so I think in terms of on a macro level, trying to facilitate change or encourage change, you kind of need to look in the mirror first. I don't think that's the only solution. I think a lot of the infrastructure we have and the systems we have in place also need to change, but we can try and do that through the democratic process, or those are the tools we have.
No, that's interesting. I mean, I really do agree that we need to, I mean, start with ourselves. Of course, looking at, okay, what can I do about things, right? I think that's I mean, just from a philosophical point of view, I think that's a fundamental view of how we should look at things. To be proactive and what I call be above the line, to to take personal responsibility for the change that we want to see. I think that's really important. However, I mean, the context can really facilitate that change as well. I mean, we talked about where is the force coming from that is pushing or influencing the change, right? And I mean, through the structures or the systems that we're seeing. But even, I mean, we're still in the middle of the pandemic here, and just thinking about how that is actually pushing change. I mean, there's a lot of tragedy with the pandemic. I mean, obviously, there's no getting away from that. So I don't want to say that the COVID situation is great. However, if you look at it from a more positive side, I think that the context of the pandemic is driving to a large extent a very positive change that none of us kind of was thinking of a year ago. And just thinking about how that the classical change curve, when you're starting of maybe a stage of shock or maybe denial or rejection, that this, it's not going to come to Sweden, right? The pandemic, that was very much the situation in the
Really?
beginning.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's in China, it's far away, right? And then Italy, yeah, it will
Ah,
stay
that's true. At the
there.
beginning, yeah, at the beginning we had that in Germany
Yeah,
as well. Yeah.
yeah. Um, and I actually thought, well, it's gonna be like SARS. It's gonna blow over two months, and then it's fine. Obviously, I was very wrong, but still was stuck in that that stage of rejection, right? That okay, I see it here, but it's not working. Oh, it's all bad. What's gonna happen? I don't see any benefits of the situation that I've been put into right now. I mean, especially for us dealing with training, traveling, and having workshops and stuff like that. Ooh, this is not going to happen, right? And then moving on to a little bit more of the exploration phase of looking for options. People are looking for small steps to take forward, called in to try something. This is actually working, and now I could probably say that I'm in the stage of commitment now. That, this is working. This is, um, I'm able to see the positive sides of the change. I'm looking forward to continuing the situation that I'm in, and also taking advantage of the fruits that are being they're coming sort of post pandemic, right? So it's through this year, I can see quite clearly my own journey through that change journey, and how we react to the change that are forced upon us. Um, so I don't know where I'm going with this really, but
No,
I guess I
but I'm
started
getting you're
that.
pointing me in a direction that I think is interesting too, and it comes down to the challenges that we face in life, the big changes that make us uncomfortable, the things we don't like. As I said before, the more we resist against them, the more we resist, the more it persists. It was Carl Jung who said something like that. What we resist persists. But I think what I've realized, and I agree with you, any big challenge, any major catastrophe, whether it's a pandemic or whether it's an economic crisis or some other unforeseen thing. Maybe it's a more personal level, maybe it's a more macro level. But any of these things, they will inevitably bring out the best in us. Challenges make us better. Challenges always will improve. And I think what the benefits that I've seen from this change, and yeah, it was totally unexpected. I was fully expecting that you and I would be doing some more workshops in 2020 in China, or other projects like that. And that's not what happened, but other things filled that space. I was very fortunate, but I was also, I think what it proved to me is that, I can get through difficult times. New opportunities will come out of the changes, right? Trusting that change will bring new opportunities as well as challenges. And I think that the change of pace, I think, is going to have long-lasting, far-reaching implications. People who now realize, well, I can work from home, and how does that change the family dynamic? For some people, it's like, wow, I didn't realize how much I'm missing out on my kids. And now they're kind of finding ways to, be more interactive. And even as we come out of COVID, finding ways to find more work-life balance. For other people, it's like, actually, this has really brought to life the issues that I was avoiding in my relationship, that is addressed, or people, part ways. That there are so many things out of these challenges that will really, the challenges will show our weaknesses and our strengths, and that will give us a clearer path to what we want to change and what we need to change. So, these difficult times are never fun, but there are always opportunities at the end of them or during them, and when we rise to the occasion and we don't face things with just overcome by fear. We recognize that, look, there's no going around this. There's just through. When we can take that kind of a way, if you have that mindset, that mental approach to it, you'll come through change a lot better. So, the topic that you put forward is dealing with change. I think it's just confronting your fears that are related to a particular change, and then really, just pushing through and trusting that you have anything life throws at you, you have the ability and the power to get through it. I'm so confident in that. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, especially during these times. I mean, we will get through it, right? And we'll grow from it as well. There will be so much upside.
Definitely. Yeah.
So,
I mean, again, I don't want to downplay the very sad parts of the deaths, and I mean the increase of domestic violence, and there's a lot of, I mean, really tragic parts of the pandemic. Right? I don't want to neglect that, but I mean, I guess we're trying to see the positive sides of the change here that we're facing as well.
Well,
actually,
if I can I throw one thing in? I recently saw an interview with a guy that was being held. There's actually a movie been made about him. He wrote a book, and it's The Mauritanian. And I regret that I don't remember his name, but he was being held without charge, without trial in Guantanamo Bay, and I think he was there for more than 6 years, and eventually was released. And the thing is, he left with so much. He even contacted one of the guards there and befriended him, and they're friends. And he has so much compassion and empathy, and he was tortured. It was a terrible experience for him, but now, from what I gather from his interview, he has come out of that stronger, clearer, more committed to his faith, but also just a totally different perspective on humanity. He's learned a bunch of languages. He's, just all of these things that, and you can, so that's one example, but even someone like Nelson Mandela, I mean, he became the leader of South Africa. Could he have done that without all those struggles and hardships that he went through? So these challenges we're put through the changes that we're dealing with in life, I think it's just important to look for those things that could come out of it, those things that could really, bring us a step further if we only embrace them, rather than putting the brakes on and resisting them.
Yeah, sure. I mean, those challenges definitely, kind of define us as individuals of how we deal with these challenges. So yeah, it's but when you're in that situation, it's very difficult to be in that kind of have the awareness and the ability. But with that said, I mean, one thing I think that I just want to summarize and really emphasize is this importance of finding these unconscious blockages or obstacles to the change. What is making it so difficult? I mean, I think that's really key when we're talking about change. But also, another point is maybe more in the organizational context, and also for us as working with people development, is how we can support others with dealing with the change, right? And especially for leaders then that are trying to, I mean, leaders are very often put in the position that they have to drive change in the organization and really, push change and initiate change, etc. And then making sure that the people that they're working with are able to follow and buy in and get engaged. And I mean, obviously that's something that is very difficult to do because of all of these things that we've been talking about. But how can we support people in dealing with change in a more effective way and in a participative way? I think that's also worth discussing, right?
Absolutely. So it depends if you're talking about in a professional setting, in an organization or on an individual level. Whenever people come to me on the for coaching in order to facilitate change in their lives, it's always first and foremost about getting clarity. Where are you now? Where do you have a clear idea of where you want to be, and not just what you don't want? Sometimes knowing what you don't want helps you see more clearly what you do want, but still you still got to get to that point where you have a reasonable amount of clarity on at least the direction that you want to be going. So finding clarity, and when there's clarity, there's less resistance to change. And then from there, looking at, okay, well, if you are clear and you're still not doing anything about it, where's the roadblock? What's the resistance? What's holding you back? It's usually a fear. It's usually some kind of a perception of the situation or the risk. So once you've got clarity, recognizing what your roadblocks are, and then just working and not being afraid to ask for help. And that's why it's so valuable to work with a coach, and not trying to advertise my services, but with any coach, it's really hard. I go to coaches because I don't see my own roadblocks some of the times. A lot of the times they're really difficult to identify and see or admit to, right? Sometimes we're just in denial. When it comes to organizational change, we talk about culture change. You can look at it on two levels. There's the top-down approach where it's and this is what I think is usually the most effective and quickest way to change is when it's led by the top of an organization by providing a really clear vision and really being clear on what kind of behaviors and values that you want in your organization, and making sure that's followed through throughout your hierarchy. And then the other way is virally, right? But that's usually by bringing the right people into an organization that can have that kind of positive change. And so that means you have to have a really good HR strategy and make sure you're very clear what culture you want, so you make sure that the people you hire are a good cultural fit and will then virally influence the change that you want in your workplace. Both can work, but I think you have more control if you're doing the top-down approach. So that's.
I think I agree. I mean, you probably have more control, but I would probably disagree in the level of speed. I would assume that a viral change actually happens a lot quicker. I mean, it's more difficult to control and manage, but I guess the whole purpose of a viral change is that it has a more social impact and kind of accelerates a lot quicker if the what do you call it, if the wheels hit the track, really, right?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the size of your organization and how many people that possess the qualities that you want to bring into your organization. So it depends on how influential the people you're bringing in are, and how many people they have contact with. What's their network like? That can happen very quickly. You can have, on the negative side, you can have one bad hire who can be a negative virus in your organization. So I guess the same could be true on a positive level. Although I do find that sometimes, because we're so hyper aware of the negatives and the things that trigger our fears, that tends to have a stronger impact on us. I just think that, from a control level, the top-down approach is the one that, from my philosophy is more successful. I just have not seen the viral approach be super effective in a reasonable amount of time, or at least consistently. Maybe it's the consistency piece, because
Yeah, I
maybe,
mean it's also a newer concept in that sense,
mm,
right? So we probably don't have enough data and cases about how it actually works, and it's probably a lot more difficult to measure and track as
yeah,
well in that sense.
because there are no processes.
But
What
I mean, a
processes
few
can you
things
use
there that.
for viral change, right? What processes can you implement? It's easier to do it at the top level. So, sorry.
Yeah, and it's more about the peer support and the behaviors of the people in the organization. So in that sense, the the perspectives or the leadership approach becomes a little bit different as well,
Hmm.
right? In viral change, talk a lot more about this backstage leadership to be there to support changes, support communities of doing stuff, projects, and the right kind of behaviors, and then the peer influence will be much stronger, and finding these positive. Benchmarking behaviors that we want to see more and letting that spread in the organization. So in that case, I guess the leadership approach becomes a little bit different. In what I was saying before, and I want to relate to what your experience as a coach, what the needs are for the coachees or the people that you're coaching. I mean, that becomes part of the leadership role when you're dealing with change in organizational level.
Hmm.
There's so much need for the listening part to identify the obstacles, what's difficult for you, what could be some short-term objectives, breaking it down, seeing any kind of successes, trying to look at the opportunities and stuff. So I mean, it's like the leader has to take a little bit of a coaching role there, and use these kind of skills in facilitating the change for people that we're working with, right?
Absolutely. You have to address people's fears. You have to understand why they're going to resist change. You need to make sure that the right incentives are in place, right? There's a lot of people are invested in keeping things the same. This is what we were
Yeah,
talking about
definitely.
earlier, and the systems in place that have all these incentives to avoid change, right? To keep the existing structures in place.
Yeah. And what if, I mean, I find this fascinating actually, that in most organizations, I mean, things are changing a little bit now, but if we look back over the years, that every year, you get new targets, and every year it's this discussion, this is crazy. We're never going to make it. That increase is just impossible. But very, very often, they still hit the targets, right?
Hmm.
It's still going through that stage of resistance. Oh, this is impossible. And I'm actually amazed of how many, well, of two things. I'm amazed of how many organizations and teams and individuals do it. They make it, right? Looking back at the year, and very often they beat the targets by far, right? That's amazing achievement. But then also that this happens every year. You're like, oh, here we go again. Oh, it's going to be impossible. And then you reach it. And then
Hmm.
next, oh, it's going to be impossible, right?
Yeah.
It seems like we never learn, right?
Yeah.
Well, but it's the same kind of fears and the same kind of resistance that are triggering us again, I guess.
I think you can only do that for so long, because if your goals and targets are very one dimensional, like they often are in the corporate world, where it's you're measured on profit delivery, or just or revenue or whatever. It's just these sort of very one dimensional things that we're trying to achieve, as opposed to, we talked on our very first one about having more purpose driven organizations, where you have different types of motivation. But that's the thing. Yeah, every year, especially, I've managed sales people, and I've been a salesperson, and every year it's like, well, you never want to tell them that you can, you always want to submit targets that you think that you can achieve that are below what you actually can, so you can over deliver, or so you have a buffer, and you're not going to come up short. But there'll always be complaining, oh, we can't achieve these. But you're also right that a lot of times what people, unless you push people, they don't realize what they can. And I know this from the sports world. Unless you push people beyond what they think they can do, they'll never realize their full potential. And especially, I find this when I've worked with kids, well, not kids, but adolescents, youth, teenagers. A lot of times they don't realize how much potential they have, and when you push them in a positive way, they just realize that they can do so much more than they realized they could. It's the same for adults too. But
sure, and I think I've talked about this before, but a lot of both when I look at goal setting, thinking, I mean, beyond these result goals and looking at performance goals and process goals and also learning goals. And supporting that, and then we're looking at opportunities for growth and development. What can I learn here? So what are the opportunities for me to, if I learn to do this a little bit better, that's going to have a very positive effect on the results as well. So for me, that's very much tapping into the motivation of how we can make things more effective, but also on a personal level of what can I benefit from this. And we're not talking about financial rewards here, just in terms of growth, right?
Yeah, if you can keep people feeling like they're learning something new, they're going to remain engaged, and they're going to. I think they'll be in. It's as much a mechanism for retention as any kind of financial reward. If people feel like they're really engaged in the work they're doing, they feel like they add value, and they feel like they're consistently growing, then we talked about this in the motivation piece. But the financial rewards only take you so far. If you don't have those other elements, it's just not. And that's when I've, whether I'm talking to someone, coaching them through, their leadership role and setting KPIs for people, or when I've set KPIs for people, I always give them at least one where they choose their own KPI, their own thing. It's something that needs to make a contribution, but it's their own personal goal for themselves, and they need to figure out a way how it can add value. But just in growing their own knowledge and experience and ability, they're going to be able to make a better contribution. So, as much as it needs to be work related, I think everybody can find something fun and interesting that they can, that's not to do with hitting certain financial targets or distribution targets or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so when I let someone, and that's back to that degree of autonomy, some degree of self-direction. And I think that's a really important thing. So
I mean, it's something in, forgot where I read that, but when it comes to this motivational theory of having something that is driving you, that we talked a lot about purpose, but we haven't talked so much about the fun, which is another part, right? So that something that is meaningful, but also fun, with finding the happiness in work.
Yeah,
and I just another thing that you just mentioned, I read something about one of the most important parts for creating a better state of mental health in the workplace is to have a clear sense of purpose and your achievement, or your relatedness to the purpose as well.
Yeah. And I think
maybe we're driving a little bit from change here, but it's all related.
I'm about to bring it back. Trust me here.
Yeah, good.
No, I think the fun aspect is an important one to bring up, and finding enjoyment, and I think that this is where the optimism in looking at change is very important. Making the change process fun, because we focus, we're just wired that way to focus on the negatives, the risks, the things we're afraid of. But if you can, in the same way as it's helpful to get into the flow state or to get motivated to find some kind of, make a game out of it, make it fun, the same goes for dealing with change, right? Just, instead of being nervous and fear, look for the excitement in it. Look for the excitement in something new, and trying to find the fun in that. It's not always easy when it's forced upon you, but when I think it's a great one when you have some resistance to change, and you can just focus on the thing that's going to be fun about that, doing something different, right? I think we all love variety in life, right? So if you can focus on having that variety, or having something that, the change that you're trying to get in life, looking at what's fun about that, what's exciting, what's interesting about that change in my life that's going to improve the situation that I'm in. Because I think until you can add that piece to it, I don't think that you're going to find the motivation to get over those roadblocks and the resistance, that psychological homeostasis, as I put it. I don't think you'll be able to overcome those. Or what were you talking about at the very beginning? Was it assumptions, or there was a point that you made?
Assumptions.
The thing that's causing our resistance. Maybe it was assumptions.
The immunity.
The immunity.
It's the immunity to change.
Yeah, exactly. I think until you can find, you just the carrot's got to be stronger than the stick, or the incentive needs to be enough so that you can overcome your fear, right? And I don't think the incentive. I don't think the financial reward is enough. I think it has to this promise of, maybe not pleasure, but this promise of some excitement, some kind of growth, or some kind of fun, I think is really important to make sure that you get to focus in on that and get clear on that. And that'll help drive you through the resistance.
The social aspect there is really important. We talked a little bit about the importance of peer influence when it comes to viral change.
Yeah.
But also, I had a class yesterday, and we were talking about changes, and in this situation, it was we were talking about a different case, but in this situation, it was really important to identify what we call early adopters. So when it comes to technology, who there's on a bell curve, there's a certain amount of people that are early adopters that are willing to take on the change, and to utilizing this crowd in terms of creating fun and success stories and good benchmarkers, but inviting them to influence the change, and having a facilitative influence on the rest of the people, right?
Yeah,
and I think that becomes really, really important.
Yeah, so if you get enough of those innovators and early adopters into your organization, that's a great way to do viral change. But as long as you are not threatening the stability of the people because this is the thing when people talk about politics, and they're liberal or left wing, or they're conservative. But we need both. We need both in our society, right? We need the people who are kind of more cautious and more grounded, less emotional, and then we need the people who are thinking big, have vision, who are willing to take risks, who are willing to, they're always wanting to change. Whereas the conservative people want to keep things more the same, and if we can find the balance, right? So that's important.
Definitely. I think to leadership. Have we talked about empathetic leadership yet? I don't even remember. But,
no, I don't think we have.
Having really taking care of the empathetic view as well, to understand that people are struggling with this. So we can't say you're right, you're wrong, that kind of mentality, but trying to have a constructive. Well, utilize the early adopters and the innovators as a constructive mechanism to facilitate the change, but inviting for more dialogue. What can we learn from this? What's happening? Yet understanding, and that becomes very clear if we're looking at the change curve, that when you're in a stage of resistance, for example, you're not interested in learning about the opportunities. You want to be heard, you want to be listened to, you want to be cared for. So at that stage, also really taking care of that, what's going on here. Listen to the fears, the anxiety, or whatever is going on, right? But really paying attention to that, and slowly move on to a more explorative stage, I guess.
Yeah, if you are too one-sided, if you're only catering within an organization, the people that are gung ho for change, and you don't listen to those people who want to raise a few red flags or want to point out the risks, you're not going to get their commitment, right? If you're not willing to have that discussion and let people talk about their fears. So we go back to the pyramid from Patrick Lencioni, where the five dysfunctions of the team. Unless you have that trust, you're not going to have you're going to have the fear of conflict, and you're not going to have the discussion around from those people who maybe your organization has the people that are listen to them or have the biggest voice are those kind of mavericks, the cowboys, the ones who want to who are have the big vision and haven't maybe figured out what all the or haven't had the foresight to see what other problems could arise from it, and then you have the people that are more conservative or more critical thinkers, and then they're not being listened to and they're afraid to voice their opinion, and then you don't have the discussion, you don't have that conflict in order to find the resolution, and then you push ahead, and then you don't have the commitment of these people that are really important to bring along, and you need empathy for that. So just because you've got this vision, not everybody can see it. Not everybody's got a sense of it. And so it's important to have a degree of empathy for the change that you're trying to bring, the upside that it has, and the safety and security that, you're not, there are risks, but they're not overwhelming the people in your organization that are trying to hold things back.
Yeah. I think that's also why this is so closely tied to decision making. If we're looking at a change, is the decision made, and you have a very large part of the population who are rejecting or disagreeing with this decision, that's going to make it very difficult, right? Or are you initiating a change process, and you're inviting and engaging participants to be active in the actual decision before you implement the change, right? That makes a very big difference as well. So, well, I mean, we'll get back to decision making, but we're kind of there's a line there when the decision is taken or not that makes the change, well, either it could be successful or not successful. Not that easy, of course, but it puts it in a very different perspective.
Yeah, and with decision making, I always circle back to the whole point about fear. Like fear-driven choices that people make will never, well, more often than not, will lead you down the wrong path. Will lead you to places that are just going to cause more problems and issues. Right? It's that avoidance strategy rather than here's where I want to go and I'm going to go through, rather than deviating or sometimes the safest path isn't the safest. It has other risks, right? And so so I think
but also just connecting to what you said before, I mean, if we have the people who are mavericks or gung-ho for a change, or really thriving on that, if we just let them take a decision and initiate a change, and then you have a lot of the population who are not there and critical thinkers, then you're going to be in trouble, right?
Yeah, exactly. You've got to find a way to bring people together, and you don't do that until you listen to people's concerns and let them voice their fears. I think that's really important. So so maybe if we just to kind of wrap up, we can kind of summarize a few of our points, but I'll let you go first. What kind of, in terms of dealing with change personally and in an organization, what are kind of your top things that you'd like people to take away from today's conversation?
Okay, well, I mean, first of all, it's really important to be able to. It's very developing to be able to deal with change in a constructive way. It's very difficult because what I talked a lot about is these unconscious obstacles, or this immunity to change. And to be able to create awareness about that is a very difficult journey. But it's really I think it's really the source for, or the route to be able to to deal with personal change in a good way. And that's a whole topic for itself, and it takes a lot of lots of work to deal with. But then, I mean, the benefits are fantastic if we're able to do it. And then from the organizational perspective, that we have different ways of actually managing change in the organization. And that we have a lot of people, very different people will deal with change or react to change in different ways. And it's really important to utilize that energy as a leader in constructive ways and tap into how people are dealing with it, and to striking that right balance. And that's not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of attention, listening, and creativity, vision, persistence.
Absolutely.
Lots of,
yeah, I think from my side, as I said, from a coaching perspective, I'm always dealing with people who want to facilitate some kind of change. And I think so whether, if it's change that you want for your life, it's about first gaining clarity, then recognizing the things that you're resisting, and then working together with someone to kind of work through that. If change has been thrust upon you, it's about having the courage and confidence in yourself to know that you can get through anything. You've looking back, I think it's really I've asked people before who feel like they're in a bit of a crisis, have you ever had a really big challenge in your life before? And most people have had some form of challenge that they've had to overcome. And did you get through it? How did you manage it? Sure, yeah, I'm sure it wasn't fun. But think about all the things you gained from that. How much stronger did it make you? How much experience did you gain from it? How many, if you think that you made mistakes, how much did you learn from them? So, and I think in either of those cases, not to let fear drive your choices, not to let fear guide you through your change process. Otherwise, you're going to end up in a place that you probably don't want to be. And on our organizational level, it's about empathetic leadership and bringing people together. I think through change processes, you need more than ever, you need strong leadership, and you need people. People will need some kind of a plan. So if you don't have clarity on how you're going to get through this, then it's going to be difficult to lead people through that. But you need to, like we said, address people who have a more conservative or a more kind of who are more willing to embrace change. You have to bring those people together and help them see the benefits, but also address their fears and allow them to express themselves in terms of what their concerns are, so you can have that dialogue and then you can get commitment from both sides. I think that's the only way to facilitate healthy change in an organization. And and I think I'd like to leave people with the reminder that change is good. Change is a good thing. It's not only inevitable, it will always happen. And if we get too tied to our past or too tied to our current situation, if our identity is so tied to the life we have right now, that makes us susceptible, fragile for the changes that are inevitably going to come as we grow old, changes to our body, as the our societies and our economies are evolving and changing. If we're not willing to embrace that change and navigate it in a proactive way, we're going to end up being unhappy and frustrated with the situation we're in. So that's kind of how I summarize it.
Yeah. If I could just say, listening to that, I mean, my takeaway that I'd like to give myself and to others would just be, so what do you need to let go of to let come? I like just what do we need to let go of to let come, and looking into dealing with change to create or feeding change from the emerging future. I think that's it's a very interesting thought. I'm also thinking that we probably need to take this topic again, and we could do it on a maybe more pragmatic level. What are some simple steps that we could do, simple tools or techniques that helps us to deal with change. I think that could be an hour, but also we need to talk about decision making, because I think it's so tied into this and so on.
Yeah, I think change, whether on an individual level or in an organization, having the right processes are, that's what change management's all about. And for yourself to have a way of coping mechanism if you're finding yourself overwhelmed by change. So yeah, I think there's a lot of things we can still talk about. But I think it's I'm a big fan of creating your own philosophy and or having a really clearly defined philosophy for life. And I think I have a few things, if I'm confronted with a challenge, what does my philosophy say about this? I reach back into, and I remember everything works out for me. When, I have little sayings, like, not my sayings, but, like one door closes, another one opens, right? Just having a degree of optimism and faith that, things will work out. And I think when you internalize that, your brain will, you can train your brain to focus on all the risks and all the things that are going to go wrong and all the fears that you have, or you can train your brain to start looking for opportunities. Because if you're so focused on all the things that are going wrong, it's going to be really hard to see the opportunities for ways out. I love the quote from Einstein, the thinking that created a problem will not help us find the solution. I'm paraphrasing, but it's something along the lines of, we can't solve the problem with the thinking that created it.
Same level of consciousness that
created it.
Created the problem can't solve it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think those are a few words of wisdom that if you can integrate that into your personal philosophy, that'll really help you deal with any kind of change that you're facing in life. So that sounds like a pretty good place to end it for today. What's that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So
I was just saying, no regrets. I mean,
no regrets.
We usually when we look back at things, it's very seldom that we actually regret things. Surprisingly, seldom, I would say. So yeah.
Yeah, it's the things you didn't do.
There's a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, the things you didn't do and the chances you didn't take. Those are often the things, the change that you avoided will inevitably cause you more regret than having just gone ahead and taken a chance, right? So
exactly, yeah.
All right, interesting conversation as always, Toby. Thanks for joining me this morning. I think hopefully our listeners have enjoyed it as well. If you're interested in contacting Toby, he's reachable through LinkedIn. You'll find him under Tobias Demker. And for myself, I'm at my website, peterteuscher.com. We would love your feedback. If you have any suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover from our coaching, training, facilitating backgrounds, please feel free to put those forward. And look forward to any questions and comments. It's always nice to hear from people. So with that, I thank everyone for joining us for another podcast. We'll be back to you very soon with a new topic and a conversation that will take us into new places we never thought it would go. As always, it's been a pleasure, Toby. Have a great day. Great to see you again.
Thanks, Peter.
We'll talk again soon.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.